Kimberly here, recently 29 years old. Once upon a time, I made the very poor decision to wed a man who was full of issues. I had the endearing but false impression that love could make everything right. I believed that I was the one who could show him how important he was. Whoa, I was incorrect. Love is powerful, but it can't educate someone to value themselves like a magic wand. Joseph, my former partner, was consumed with the desire to please his parents. And I'm not talking about the typical desire to please your parents. Every choice he made was influenced by this intense, all-consuming fixation. It was almost as if he judged his value only by their acceptance. Now, to speak anonymously, we'll refer to his parents as Mr. and Mrs. Ellis. They were a perfect example of parents who didn't truly involve themselves in their son's life, which left him yearning for their approval and attention. I was quite sorry to witness that. It didn't take me long to realize that I couldn't bridge the emotional void his parents had left. Even worse, Joseph had a horrible tendency of spending all of our savings on things his parents desired. Yes, extravagant presents, opulent trips, and other forms of needless indulgences are what I mean. I was even more frustrated by Mr. and Mrs. Ellis's disrespect because it felt like our money went straight into their pockets. We were often fighting because of this careless spending. Our marriage was suffering because I felt like I was vying with his parents for his priorities. Even with all of the chaos and never-ending arguments, I still cared deeply about Joseph. I wished he might find genuine happiness inside himself and break free from his parents' artificial expectations. However, it became brutally evident that my love was insufficient to free him from their damaging influence. Get ready for an even more intense turn to this roller coaster tale. Joseph approached me one day, his serious expression suggesting he had important news to give. I didn't know the bombshell that was going to be thrown, but having experienced many highs and lows with him, I readied myself for what was coming. I sensed from the moment Joseph struck up the conversation that it would turn into our most contentious exchange to date. He began in a serious tone. "Kimberly, there's something crucial I need to discuss," I said, tensing up for whatever could come next. "What's going on?" He spoke with a mixture of enthusiasm and trepidation. "It's about my parents. They're retiring soon. I've been thinking of gifting them a luxury vacation as a surprise." "It's going to cost a pretty penny," I said, hoping to head off another financial argument. "That sounds lovely, as long as the money is coming from your personal savings." "I really don't want to dip into our joint savings again," Joseph said, appearing both eager and nervous. "I don't have enough to cover it myself. I was hoping to use some of our savings." I tried to gently bring Joseph back to earth by saying, "Joseph, if it's beyond what we can comfortably afford, maybe we should reconsider the expense." But he lost his temper quite soon. "You just don't get it, Kimberly. I love my parents. I want to do something extraordinary for them. Love isn't about counting every penny spent, it's about grand gestures," he passionately contended. "But love is also about being there for each other and making sacrifices together, not at the expense of our ability to support ourselves financially," I shot back. "Though I have to do this for them," Joseph insisted, "we have to consider about our future too, even though this trip might mean a lot to them. Of all people, I thought you would get it. To me, they are everything. To me, Joseph, you are everything. But we must exercise common sense. Finding a middle ground," I reasoned. "We can't just use up all our savings on one trip." He accused me of being selfish, failing to recognize the significance of his gesture. "It's not about being selfish, it's about being sensible and planning for what's ahead," I said, wondering how much he planned to spend, and my heart fell when he said he needed all of it. "All of our savings, Joseph? That's just reckless," I remarked, taken aback by how much he was asking. "No, Joseph, I'm being realistic." "You're being heartless," he shot back, certain that I couldn't comprehend his need to appease his parents. My patience was growing thin, so I responded, "Really, Joseph? We can't afford to give away $85,000 on a whim." His nonchalant remark of receiving the money back later simply made me feel even more frustrated. That's not how this operates, I retorted, a hint of sarcasm belying my incredulity. Our differences in priorities, love, and money were becoming more and more apparent. Our voices were not the only things getting louder. Suddenly, things were flying through the air, breaking as if to punctuate our furious conversation. Amidst all of this confusion, Joseph dropped a bombshell. If I couldn't support him on this, he wanted a divorce. He probably thought I would freak out and rip at the pieces of our marriage, but I didn't. Instead, I pulled together all the composure and strength I could muster and said, "Okay, Joseph, if that's truly what you desire." The look of shock on his face was priceless. He had expected tears, even begged for it, but instead he received my firm insistence that I would no longer indulge and feed his fantasies. If he wanted to waste his future chasing shadows, he could do so without me. Go ahead, spend your fortune chasing after those who hardly glance your way, I told him, firm in my resolve to end the cycle of letdowns and empty promises. I didn't mince words, I laid it all out, making it clear that his never-ending quest for his parents' approval was as pointless as trying to shield oneself from a storm with just an umbrella, an exercise in futility. He tried to counter, but a simple raise of my hand stopped him cold. I declared my exhaustion from fighting for a love ensnared by unrealistic expectations and an endless thirst for validation. And with that, the hard truth sank home for him, the terrible reality of our situation finally sinking in. Our marriage had turned into a battleground, and it was time to raise the white flag and go our own ways in search of peace. After the divorce was finalized a month ago, I can honestly say that the feeling of liberation is incredibly exhilarating. The days of craving are over, as are the never-ending arguments over money and the need for approval that we could never earn. I can now breathe freely, freed from the weight of his doubts that once shadowed my days, and every day seems to shine a little brighter. True, Joseph made attempts to sneak back into my life, cloaked in concern and queries about my well-being. Yet I could easily see through his facade. There was no way I was going to fall for his ploy once more. As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. I decisively turned away from his efforts to reignite any spark that was once there. I had realized I'd invested too much in trying to repair someone uninterested in changing. It was high time I shifted the focus to my growth and joy. Rebuilding wasn't a walk in the park, let me be clear. Splitting our shared assets and getting accustomed to a different financial reality demanded patience and resilience. I was used to a certain way of living, but adapting wasn't foreign to me. I embraced the hard work required to reconstruct my life anew, discovering a strength and independence I hadn't known was within me. Rekindling old friendships, diving back into hobbies I'd put on the back burner, and discovering new interests made the world feel vast and full of possibilities. I was keen to make the most of this fresh start. Of course, there were times when I felt alone and self-conscious, and getting used to a new budget was difficult. Divorce-related scars take time to heal, but day by day, I got comfort from the realization that I was no longer sacrificing my happiness to appease the fears of others. It's possible that the ease with which I moved forward indicated that I had been holding onto a hopeless situation for far too long, because I was amazed at how much I could accomplish after being released from that weight. And here I was, a month later, still adjusting but thriving nonetheless. While Joseph's constant messaging had taken on a new character, he was now presenting himself as the hero of a dramatic story, claiming to be in danger and demanding to meet. Weary of his repeated attempts to get in touch with me, I made the decision that it was time to address the matter, and I called him in the middle of his messages. "Joseph, we've experienced this. We've separated. We should move on now," I said forcefully. "Please, Kimberly. I just need a little time to clarify. You're the only one I can ask for aid, and I'm in terrible trouble," he begged. Despite my better judgment, I agreed to meet, maybe because of his prolonged silence, maybe because he seemed afraid. "Okay, but we're not going to meet at my house. Let's visit the cafe we used to hang out at. No ploys, did you get that?" I uttered those words. "I'm grateful, Kimberly. I simply need someone to listen, I swear. The only person who understands me is you," he said with a relaxed tone. I know what you're thinking, Kimberly. After all this, why would you agree to meet Joseph? I know I wondered why, too, but no matter how strong we are, there's always that part of us that gives into a mixture of curiosity and a gnawing shred of concern occasionally. I couldn't ignore his plea, divorced or not. There was still a part of me that cared. Thus, there we were, sitting across from one another in the quaint bistro, the sweet smell of coffee lulling us both to sleep, but not even that could ease the heavy tension in the air between us as I watched Joseph's anxious face and his heartbreaking eyes trying to play on my emotions, almost making it funny, but not this time. Instead, I leant back, calm and collected, prepared to listen to him, but assertively in charge, determined to drive this conversation in my direction. All right, Joseph, you have my focus for the time being. What is this stated peril that you are in? To be clear, I no longer have any plans to play the hero. I remarked, maintaining a firm yet approachable tone. I'm done cleaning up after your messes. I steeled myself against any emotional manipulation, but Joseph let out a big breath, his expression a pathetic mixture of sorrow and despair. Kimberly, I am aware that I have erred in the past, but this time is unique. I've had relationships with some really awful people. They're not known for their patience, and I owe them a lot of money, he admitted. I had to scoff at his melodramatic tale and raise an eyebrow. Are you serious, Joseph? Risky individuals? Shall we retell the story of your imagined pals who always seem to find themselves in trouble? My incredulity was evident. Joseph seemed to be looking for a more understanding ear as his expression changed to one of hurt and fury. This isn't made up, Kimberly. With a desperate tone in his voice, he insisted, I'm in serious difficulty, and coming to you was my final resort. All right, allow me to speculate. After our divorce, you lost your way and are now deeply in debt. Was that the trip you stated? I couldn't control my voice and attracted curious looks from other customers of the cafe. I tried to recover my composure by giving them an apologetic expression. Look, I'll admit that I became entangled in something stupid. However, I'm in a predicament right now that I can't handle by myself, Joseph said, his eyes beseeching. I was on the verge of losing it over how he could come back into my life with another dilemma, but under all of that rage was still a tiny bit of empathy for him. How much do you expect to pay? As I prepared myself, I inquired. $45,000, Joseph said in a hesitant manner. $45,000, Joseph? Do you really think this way? I didn't bother to apologize to the other customers for my scream this time. If they were in my shoes and heard what I was hearing, they probably would have reacted the same way. Instead, the customers averted their heads, their looks as piercing as knives. Please, Kimberly. I ask you to please. There's nowhere else for me to go. Joseph begged. His eyes glowing with a sincerity that reminded me of the guy I once loved, but those days were long gone, and my goal now was self-preservation, even if it meant walking away from him. I know I've made a mess of things, but you're the one person who really believed in me, Joseph said. Joseph, don't tug at my emotions. That would be far too late. At most $112,000 when you stated you required assistance, but $45,000? You've really lost it, I replied, sounding both shocked and disbelieving at the same time. Overwhelmed, Joseph started crying without seeing the strange looks from onlookers. Joseph, please settle down. This is not where a scene belongs. What will happen if you are unable to repay this? I questioned, attempting to understand the complete gravity of his situation. Kimberly, they are threatening to hurt me. I'm not making this up. Realizing the seriousness of his predicament, he managed to say, this is really bad. I relaxed a little and said, okay, Joseph, start from the beginning. I pleaded, tell me everything. As he told his story, I felt a mix of emotions, anger at his carelessness and grudging amusement at the absurdity of his circumstances. He had been depending on a friend to help him finance an extravagant trip for his parents, but that friend had ultimately let him down, leaving him deeply in debt. So, in an attempt to impress your parents, who haven't even thanked you for your efforts, you took things from dangerous people. Is that your statement? With a tone tinged with disbelief, I inquired. As he accepted the harsh reality, Joseph's face slumped, tears running down his cheeks. It's true. It's as if I don't exist to them since they went on that vacation, he said, regret evident in his voice despite everything. I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for him. Joseph had to face the repercussions of his choices head-on, which was a brutal dose of reality. Yes, even though I wanted to distance myself, I felt compassion for him after seeing how defenseless and remorseful he was. How intricate a situation he'd got himself into, I thought. Yes, Joseph, I get that the last thing you need to hear is, I told you so, but you are the one who caused this. It was not a wise idea, as I had advised you. Worse, you decided to get a divorce from me because of it, and now you're stuck in a bind. You spent all of your energy trying to win their approval, yet all you got in return was quiet. It's a difficult lesson, but you had to learn it, I remarked, my voice heaving with resignation and worry at the same time. We both found it difficult to accept this circumstance as it was. I had to acknowledge that I could no longer protect Joseph from his own choices since he had come to rely on others to validate his sacrifices and his sense of worth. I thought to myself, I had hoped that having to deal with such serious repercussions would show him that I had always supported him and that turning into someone who just looks to his parents for approval was his downfall. That moment, as we sat there in silence, the weight of our past, full of unfulfilled hopes and promises, pressing down on us, made me realize it was time to let go completely, no more second chances, no more attempting to mend the irreversible. Joseph had to face the consequences of his actions on his own, and I had to go find happiness somewhere else. With a surprising certainty, even to myself, I said, I really hope you find a way out of this, Joseph. You won't lend a hand? Joseph gave me a bewildered look and said, What the heck? No, Joseph, I'm not able to assist you. Furthermore, why not? Considering that I lack the means to save you. And even if I could, I would never take out a loan that I would have to pay back forever. I firmly stated, I can't afford to be as reckless as you've been. He said, Come on, Kimberly, please, I'm begging you, with obvious despair. Joseph, it's ridiculous to expect me to step in and fix things for you, given the way you're acting. I said, my patience is becoming thin. Indeed, I had anticipated that. You're not my enemy, you're my ex-wife, he shot back, barely preserving his optimism. But it was obvious that our paths had parted too much, and now my mission was to rediscover happiness and serenity far from the insanity that had once defined us. And Joseph, that's precisely the point at which the issue is. Because that's what I've always done, you expect that I'll be here to pick up the pieces forever. Since I am your wife, it comes naturally to me to assist you in solving your problems. However, I shouldn't and can't continue doing it. It's not my responsibility or my job. I said, after all, I don't owe you anything, especially in light of the fact that your toxic and unappreciative parents spent our hard-earned money. It's because I love them, Kimberly, he replied. But I also adore myself. I retorted, and loving myself implies taking care of myself, which includes safeguarding my well-being. Joseph lowered his eyes in a gesture of compromise, realizing that I couldn't provide him with the help he needed. I'll give you one bit of advice since it appears you have no other options, leave. Go to a remote location where they can't find you. I firmly said, I'm not sure what else you expect from me if that's not something you can handle. He sat there in silence, his expression changing to one of annoyance as if I was offended by my steadfast refusal to save him this time. It is now appropriate for us to part ways, Joseph. I refuse to be drawn back into the chaos that is your life. I hoped you would understand that we both deserve to find our peace, I added. He shot back, if you wished me well, you'd help. I'll miss you, Joseph. I got up to go, saying, I'm changing my number. Joseph sat there, his countenance a complicated mixture of emotions, and I went away, knowing that this was a painful but necessary move for my happiness and self-respect.